Now, we've all seen over recent years the rise of what's known as EDI in workplaces. For the uninitiated, that's equality, diversity and inclusion. But a new job advert suggests that one organisation at the heart of our country is perhaps more in the grip of EDI requirements than others. This job advertisement within the NHS for an Assistant Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion offers a salary of £91,317. Very specific. While that figure is eye-watering on its own, it's only when we compare it to other roles that the full extent of this EDI curiosity becomes clear. The Treasury, yes, that Treasury, advertised the role of Head of Cyber Security, a role many I'm sure would suggest is more important than diversity. Well, that pays somewhere between £50,000 and £57,000. That means the Treasury's cyber security head would be paid around half the salary of an NHS Assistant Diversity Director. While that sinks in, what other comparisons can we make? It appears that the extraordinary feat of reaching outer space is not deserving of the same wage of an Assistant Director of Diversity at the NHS, with an astronaut being expected to earn between £40,000 and £86,000, depending on experience. Well, with me now is the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and my panel remains with me as well, former Labour advisor Stella Santakidu and former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie. Benjamin, it's extraordinary when we compare these jobs to equality, diversity and inclusion jobs. This is a racket.
No, I don't think it's extraordinary at all. Only thing that's extraordinary is the fact that the Treasury is paying someone with such a critical role such a pathetic sum of money. I am strongly of the opinion that those kind of jobs in Whitehall should be offering 4 times that salary, because then we might have a more effective civil service that can compete with the private sector. When you look at something like the NHS and NHS trusts, which are massive organisations with budgets of tens of millions of pounds, first of all, they have a legal requirement to ensure that they meet all of the diversity laws, that staff aren't victims of racism and sexism. We know, for example, that women still earn less than men in many roles. The British Medical Association found that...
Only if you compare different jobs.
Well, there are so many examples that you hear all the time of women not getting the promotions, not getting the same salaries. But take the British Medical Association's research that found that 1/3 of ethnic minority doctors and nurses said that they'd considered leaving the profession because of things like racism and prejudice. Now, it would cost a lot more than 91 grand to recruit all of those doctors and nurses.
Benjamin, this isn't the head of diversity. This is an assistant head of diversity. There are many people who have higher roles within the diversity department of NHS trusts and individual hospitals even, who are on more than this. It's a huge amount of money.
It's not.
It's far... You saying £91,000 a year is not a huge amount of money?
I don't think it is.
That is well into the top 2% of salaries.
Well, not quite the top 2%, but it's not an unreasonable amount of money, because first of all, as I say, there's the legal responsibility. I hate this idea that we have in this country. I'm sorry, I can't stand the line of questioning where people look at well-paid senior jobs and go, oh, how dare they earn that money? Good, I want more better paid jobs with that responsibility. But look at what the NHS does.
Why is this such a responsibility? The NHS should be treating people. The NHS should be investing perhaps more in modern technology than in diversity managers.
Well, the fact is, what does the NHS does? It treats people in their healthcare in some of the most critical moments in their lives. There was research only last year that found that black women were still far more likely to have serious complications during pregnancy compared to white women. Now, how do you resolve serious inequalities like that? You have to have a staff and a structure that can overcome it in their representation, in how they see the problems in the NHS, and that takes investment.
Are they doing that, or are they just promoting lots of lovely sort of cork boards with initiatives and ways for people to involve themselves in seminars? Because it does seem that in much of the private sector and the public sector, it's sort of after-work drinks or mid-work equality walks.
Look, I don't know. Look, I won't walk far for much, but look, I think the problem the NHS faces isn't diversity officers trying to improve the service. It's a lot of straight white right-wing blokes that have been running it from the Tory government for the last 40 years.
Well, let's turn to a straight white right-wing bloke. Kelvin Mackenzie, what do you make of that?
Well, I clearly you haven't been in a hospital lately, where if you go into a hospital, the actual people, I suspect, this was set up in order to make sure that people of colour got a crack of the whip in every way. Actually, the NHS is by and large run by majorities. So if you're actually saying what we should have is more people who are white trying to fight for the minority of employees who are white and aren't getting promoted, I could understand your argument. I can't believe that we need any more people to do this kind of jobs. In places like News Corp, right, an organisation I know reasonably well, when that poor guy died in America,
George Floyd, you're talking about?
Yes, they had a 9-minute silence for him, right? A more absurd and ridiculous idea I'd never come across in my life, because their equality and diversity people said, we've got to make a big show of that. How do you feel about 9 minutes for George Floyd?
Well, of course, that's the length of time that he was strangled by a police
I know why it
officer.
was, but how do you feel about that?
Well, I think a lot of the black staff in particular in News Corp probably appreciated the fact that it was taking a stand. And if you look at businesses...
Why do they need to take a stand about what the police do in the United States
well, what
of
about
America?
the guy... What about the jeweller tonight who has died in Richmond in Surrey when two, how should we put them, hoodlums of colour actually had a chokehold? He went home and he killed himself. So how many minutes should we give to that? There are lots of things going on in our world, as you well know, which are very upsetting.
Okay.
And if we're going to stop every time that somebody dies in unfortunate circumstances, we'll never get any work done. And that is why I'm hostile to this.
Well, Stella, a final word to you.
I think sometimes, yes, equality and diversity can be a waste of money when it goes to things that are not necessary for the function of the organisation. But when just last year you had Birmingham Council being pushed into bankruptcy because they were found out to not have given women equal wages.
No, because they paid bin men more than they paid cooks.
But then you can see Ben's point that if they had someone who was looking appropriately in equality and diversity and the actual practical policy implications of what they were doing, then maybe you wouldn't have this situation. You wouldn't have this legal liability. That's what Ben is saying. This is a multi-million pounds organisation. Like, it needs to have someone looking seriously and taking responsibility for these decisions.
Well, we asked the NHS about this job role, and a spokesperson said NHS England has saved over £400 million this year by shrinking its workforce, money which is being diverted to the front line. Following a review of equality, diversity and inclusion roles, NHS England has reduced these posts by more than a third, and the remaining positions are there to support the NHS to meet its legal duties, as well as to help recruit and retain staff. So perhaps, even though there are these jobs being advertised, there are fewer than there were just a few years ago.